over, we treated a broken mind the same way we treat a broken leg. Just by telling the person, you'll be fine, it'll pass. We spend many years in school learning to calculate the area of a circle or memorizing ancient dates for ancient battles, yet we never spend 1 hour of our day trying to understand the one thing that dictates every aspect of our lives, our minds. As someone who has been an advocate for students' mental health and well-being, I have seen firsthand how being silent and internalizing everything made students suffer. Mental health education is not a luxury, nor is it a soft subject. It is something that needs to be addressed for everyone to understand. It needs to be integrated in schools, and we need to understand the coping mechanisms to help break that cycle of silence and suffering. To start off, mental health is briefly mentioned in schools. That needs to change. It is not okay. Mental health is a topic that should be mentioned more often in schools for students to get comfortable with the idea that it is more serious than it seems. Many students walk around the halls looking at posters and flyers but never pay attention to what is really actually on those posters. Some forms that we can change this is by making a school-wide assembly and gathering students to talk about these and teach them during lessons or like seminars. In other words, advising students as well about mental health and the resources that are available is also another key thing that will help students. Having these resources available to everyone makes it possible for these students to feel safe and comfortable, or at least confident enough to start that healing process. As a result, about 40% of teenagers have shared or expressed persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness in 2023, down to 42% in 2021, but still significantly higher than 30% in 2013. According to the report of the CDC, they showed alarming rates of 57% of females that showed persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness in 2023, but that figure dropped, my slide guys, sorry. But that figure dropped then to 53% in 2023. The projector is crooked, I apologize. But that is still significantly higher than for males by 28%. In another article, it is stated that less than half of the adults who struggle with mental illness have received treatment in a given year. That is because receiving the necessary help is not always accessible to everyone, which is why the resources being accessible to everyone is needed and is crucial for us to deal and help cope with our mental health. While the percentages of mental health struggles have diminished since the spike due to the pandemic, there are still alarmingly high rates compared to earlier years of mental health increases. However, there are ways for students to regulate their thoughts and emotions through coping mechanisms. But before getting into those coping mechanisms, one may ask where exactly the struggle of mental health came from. Is it from the constant academic pressure, or is it the social aspect that tends to frighten even the youngest student? Both of these answers cannot be counted out. However, children's mental health difficulties is sometimes exposed through their actions, commonly manifest themselves in school as a result in devastating consequences like suspension, or in the worst case scenario, expulsion. This will then sit in the back of the student's head until that student reaches out for help, or until a student hits a breaking point. Coping mechanisms for students often involve a blend of practical lifestyles. For example, doing breathing or grounding exercises like the 5-4-3-2-1 method. It helps to stay it helps to keep students present in what they are feeling. Wellness is also multidimensional and may include medical, emotional, environmental, occupational, physical, intellectual, spiritual, social, and the list goes on. It's not always just about what we think, but it involves many aspects and can be multidimensional. On a long-term level, establishing a consistent routine, including prioritizing our sleep, that is the baseline. Scheduling breaks, doing physical activities, those are baselines to help us from being burnt out. Another thing would be being socially connected, having a support group as well. And another thing that also is hard for many, that's seeking professional help. Finally, I wanted to go into the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. The grounding method is 5 things that you see around you, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, and 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Students find relief by practicing self-compassion as well, involving the shift of focus from perfectionism to it's okay to mess up. This brings me to my last question, which is, why is mental health education important? Well, to conclude, not only is mental health education important, but it is essential to our well-being, simply because understanding and knowing the signs of what we are experiencing is detrimental to us, not only as students in our academic performance, but in our everyday lives and work, in our professions, etc. I personally have been in that position of not knowing what I was experiencing was anxiety and depression. And I believe that having these skills of the warning signs and the coping mechanisms behind it is very detrimental for kids, especially the younger generations. I know that here in the community college we have what we call is the You Will, which is free immediate access to therapy that not many students know about. It is free and accessible to anybody that needs it. And to end with this, mental health is not a joke. It is something that should not be taken lightly, nor should it be taken as a joke. As we teach this and implement this in the schools at our younger generations, it'll help students in the newer and future generations to understand what they are feeling and how to regulate their emotions and how to be a better society and a productive group. Is my work cited?